After we built the perfect striker in BLUELOCK, it is now time for us to build the perfect midfielder. And as always, we are going to start with some rules. First, as you all know, the pros are excluded from lists like this. I feel including the pros makes it a very boring list, because honestly they will take every slot. Even though in this regards, only Snuffy, Cavasauce and Luna have shown midfielder feats. However, I still wouldn't include the pros. Also, unlike strikers, we can divide midfielders into two categories, offensive midfielders and defensive midfielders. And thus here we actually are going to have two lists. I know I did not specify this in my post, but after considering the video, I actually came up with two lists. And finally, as always, we will try to make the points coherent, like giving weapons and techniques that work with each other, instead of just ramming the best in each category and calling it a day. And so with that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the offensive midfielder. As always, first we will talk about the playing style in general, and then we will move to each point individually. And the points I have chosen for the offensive midfielders are as follows: physicality, mentality, ego, vision, field IQ, passing trajectory, passing versatility, seriousness, and a set of 3 abilities. And so let's start straight up with the playing style. In my perfect striker video, I actually gave this point to Ren, seeing that he is so versatile at being a striker. And so it makes total sense for us to give the playing style in general to his brother, Itoshi Sai. In fact, as you all know, Sai is better than Ren. He's actually more versatile and more well-rounded, and thus he's actually a very obvious pick for us here. Next, let's talk about physicality. And here, it's too very obvious. Surprising to no one, for an offensive midfielder, we value different things than for a striker, and thus for physicality, I'm not going to go with speed like I did in the previous video, but rather I'm going to go with well-roundedness. And thus here, there isn't a better player than Reo, and as I said, it's actually a very easy choice as well. Next, for mentality. Here, I actually was gonna choose Sai. However, when it comes to his mentality, something bothers me with him. You see, when he deems a player non-worthy, he actually gets very salty with them, and that definitely hurts the team morale. And it's not like Isegi's trash talk that might entice competition. Sai demoralizes his teammates. And thus here I am actually going to go with another player who has a very serious mentality about becoming the best midfielder ever. Of course, I'm talking about Hiyori. And actually in the same vein, I am going to give ego to Hiyori. Yes, I feel Sai's ego is bigger than Hiyori's. However, I don't feel it is very fleshed out like Hiyori's. And thus for both mentality and ego, I am giving it to Hiyori. The guy is a super genius, and also he wants to be the best producer for goals, and thus he checks both points really well. Moving on, for vision, it is obvious again. There isn't really a better vision for a midfielder than Charles. Yes, I feel like Sai could have his vision as well, however that's not proven now. And so it goes for Charles. I mean, the guy has the best meta vision that can rival Isegi, Kaiser and Hiyori. And on top of that, he has the sniper eyes, which are the predator eyes for midfielders. And thus he actually makes the most obvious choice for us. For field IQ, I'm going to give it to Sai. I feel if he wasn't salty, he would make for the smartest midfielder ever. However, there is no denying this. When it comes to reading the field, when it comes to reading his opponents and his teammates, there isn't really a better player than Sai. And I know Hiyori makes for a strong argument here too, but I think Hiyori relies a lot on Isegi, and that's definitely not good. However, Sai on the other hand is just him. And so I'm giving it to Itoshi here. Moving on, for passing versatility. Here, I'm actually going to give it to Charles as well. Yes, we've seen some versatile passes from Sai, however they do not even begin to reach the level of versatility Charles has been showing us. I mean, just take chapter 274, the guy was insane with his passes. Not only did he cross pass, he actually chose a place where the 2 strikers of PXG could reach. And thus, without a doubt, Charles takes this point very easily. But moving on from passing versatility to passing trajectory. And what I mean by this is actually the passing delivery, the way the midfielder reaches the striker. And I think here there isn't a better choice than Ness's gentle passes. His passes are actually perfect for the striker he's trying to pass to, and he constantly delivered passes that gave freedom to Kaiser, and hell, even Noah as well. He gave him a perfect pass that allowed him to start his machine dribbling, and thus I think Ness fits here perfectly. And the final criteria is seriousness. And here it goes without saying, Psy. I mean, I wouldn't give it to Charles for obvious reasons, and I wouldn't really give it to Ness for his obsession with Kaiser. Hiyori makes for a strong argument, but as I said, he's way too reliant on Isigi, and we still did not see him in a game without Isigi, and thus we really don't know how cool he would keep his head, and for that reason I'm giving it to Psy. And finally we reach the 3 abilities. And for the first skill, since we are going to go with Psy's playing style, it makes total sense for me to include his dribbling. His dribbling is actually reactive dribbling, which makes it deadlier than other types of dribbling. Furthermore, it is very calculated, and it gives Psy the space he needs to pass, and thus I think it's perfect. Next, I'm thinking egocentrism. I think a midfielder that understands the striker's motives would make for a very scary player. You see, he can match the striker without even having any eye contact, kinda like Hiyori did with Isigi. And also we've seen Psy do it in the U20 game, and hell, even Charles have it through instinct. And thus the second skill I think should be egocentrism. For the final skill, I am going to go with Ryo's chameleon style, just to give our perfect player a nudge of creativity and versatility. And also, as I said before, I feel the chameleon style is better than Isigi's adaptability, had Ryo had a better mentality and a better ego, which is pretty covered for our list today, because we have Hiyori's mentality and ego, and thus I think the chameleon style would shine here really well. But ladies and gentlemen, with this we are done with the offensive list, and it's time for us to move to the defensive list. First, the playing style in general as always, then physicality, mentality, ego, vision, field IQ, stamina, and seriousness. And of course the set of 3 abilities. I figured we don't really need passing, rather we need stamina, so our defensive midfielder would hold the line very well. And so without any further ado, let's begin. Starting up straight with the playing style in general, and here I am going to give it to Karasu. I mean, not a single player is more worthy. He is the best defensive midfielder we've seen yet, excluding that time when Snuffy played as a defensive midfielder. But given that the NEL is about to end and no one comes close in the U20 category, makes Karasu a very easy choice. But now, moving on to physicality. In the offensive list, I give it to Ryo. However, for the defensive lists, we don't really need versatility that much. Instead, we need endurance. We need a player with a strong muscle mass, and also a player who can be fast, but also a player who is sturdy. And I think there isn't a better choice here than Tokimitsu. I mean, the guy is a monster. If it hadn't been for his weak mentality and ego, I think Tokimitsu would have been an insane player. However, and as always, we don't have issues here, we only have good parts, and from Tokimitsu we will take his physicality. Next, for mentality, I am going to give it again to Karasu. I mean, I'm trying to think of a better defensive midfielder that has a bigger brain. In fact, no, think about it, in all of BLUELOCK, Karasu is up there with the smartest people ever, and thus he makes for a very easy choice. Next, for ego, I actually was gonna choose Karasu again, however I decided to give it to another player, to a dark horse of sort. I'm talking about Raichi. Yeah, I know, I'm throwing a curveball here, but hear me out. Raichi has always been intense. Raichi has always been trying to do his best and trying to be the best. And sure, it did not work as a striker, however, ever since he took the mantle of a defensive midfielder, he kinda became a team leader, taking Kaiser's place actually. And also he's always on the look to make himself stand out, which makes him a very worthy choice here. But moving on to vision, I think this is the first and maybe the last list that we will not include the metavision player. I really do not think the metavision is that necessary for a defensive midfielder. Because as we are seeing right now, Raichi is doing fine when it comes to reading the field. Sure, Charles slipped past him few times, however for that I think there is a far more fitting vision. I'm talking about the assassin's eyes, and so for vision, again it's going to be Karasu. I swear guys, much like I did not intend for Psy to dominate the offensive list, I also did not intend for Karasu to dominate the defensive one. And so let's just move on to field IQ, and here I'm actually going to throw another curveball and give it to Lorenzo. I know, he's a defender, however, I think he has the highest perception in BLUELOCK save the metavision users. He is still the only player without metavision that was able to dodge both Isigi and Kaiser point blank multiple times. The only other player that comes close is Berserker Ren, which is such an insane perception feat. But also we've seen him throughout the Ubers game how he chose the most critical point, whether be it Kaiser or covering Yuki or hell being the best at building an attack. And actually you could choose Karasu here as well, because he has shown the ability to spar with Metavision users and still come on top. However, I still think Lorenzo has a better argument. And FYI, you could change Karasu for Lorenzo when it comes to vision as well, since I think that Dawn also has the assassin's eyes. But that's besides the point. Moving on to the next point, which is stamina. And here, it goes without saying, I'm gonna give it to Raichi. Sure, I could give it to Takemitsu, but when it comes to stamina, no one stands above Raichi. So moving on to the final point, which is seriousness. And here, I'm actually going to give it to Raichi as well. I mean, I could choose Karasu again, which is funny because Karasu almost fits in every point, but I think Raichi promoting himself to be the leader of BM without them knowing it is such a seriousness feat that I cannot really ignore it, and so for seriousness, I'm choosing Raichi. And now finally, it's time for the set of 3 abilities. First, when it comes to how dominant Lorenzo was, I think his biggest shortcoming was him not having egocentrism. You see, both Hiyori and Isigi were able to trick him point blank because he lacks egocentrism, and he lacks the ability to understand what the player is doing. He can lock down any player, and with his high perception he can target any player. However, I feel with egocentrism, him and Karasu become deadly. And in fact, I think Karasu is using egocentrism to a limited degree. You see, he's always trying to dissect what his opponents are trying to do or are thinking, and thus I think egocentrism would fit perfectly as the first ability. Next, and since we really don't need any dribbling, I think I'm going to take another point from Karasu and talk about his ball keeping and retention, relying on his long hands and high reach. And think about it, with Takemitsu's physique, Raichi's stamina, and Karasu's hands, this player is not going to lose the ball once he has it. I don't care who you throw at him, he could actually have a favorable matchup against Snuffy, which I would have loved to include his jujutsu instead of Karasu's hand placement. However, since the pros are excluded, I think Karasu's ability would do wonders here. As for the final ability, I am actually going to choose Korona's fast corner cuts. You see, with Takemitsu's physique and Korona's ability to cut corners, I think this defensive midfielder would be a wall that is very hard to penetrate. Not only is he good against dribblers like we've seen Takemitsu, but also he's good against speedsters, and thus I think this ability fits perfectly with our player. However, with this, we actually reached the end of the video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, thank you for watching.